Break podcast. I'm joined this week by a childhood friend of mine who is the Limerick Desmond Lee Kennedy Cup team manager, Newcastle West Town coach, the owner of one of the sharpest football brains I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and hopefully will be a regular contributor on the podcast over the coming while, Kieran Shanahan. Kieran, thanks very much for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me, and thanks for the lovely introduction.
Before we start, I suppose just cheers, good health. It's a pity we can't be.
I know.
We can't be together doing this with lockdown and that, but cheers and good health. Whenever I'm asked where was I when I heard Princess Diana had died, the answer to that question is I just after coming back from the hurling field in Rahena, where I'd met Kieran Shanahan for the first time and we're playing soccer over in the hurling pitch. And I hope in later years when you're managing in England, Kieran, I'll be asked that question in reverse. Where were you when you first met Kieran Shanahan? You know, we are going to be discussing another team tonight who also play in black and white, although your guys play in a bit in yellow as well as black and white, and also have Newcastle in their title, Newcastle United FC, who you've been a long-suffering fan from for the past 25 years. So that's going to be the topic of tonight's show. Kieran will be coming on in other episodes as well, talking about his coaching style and his experiences and sharing his experiences with that. And we look forward to discussing that on a later date. So this is a question that I'd imagine you've asked yourself a number of times over the last 25 years. But why Newcastle? Why support Newcastle United?
The answer is less complicated than the subsequent 25 years have been much more torturous than the way it came about. I think the way it came about was I started taking an interest around about 95, 96. I was young now, but I started taking interest in football, and my uncle Richard was a Man United fan, and he bought me a Newcastle jersey for maybe my 7th birthday in 1996 kind of time, around the time Alan Shearer signed. So my birthday was the 27th of July, 96. I would have been 7, and Shearer signed 3 days later.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of a confluence of events, but I must have, I don't really remember it great, but I must have been taking an interest in them to say that I was bought a jersey, like, because a Man United fan would only buy you a United jersey if he thought he could get away with it.
Yeah,
so.
I was just going to say it would be like I enjoy your Uncle Richard as well. We've good encounters on Facebook, but I'm sure if he could, he'd have you wearing the red and white of United. But Richard is always very logical in his analysis of games. Anyway, in fairness to him, and he congratulated me and Liverpool winning the league last year, even though there could have been a touch of sarcasm to the congratulations. It took 30 years, but he said congratulations anyway. So we'll take it. So Richard, I hope you're well and enjoying watching your nephew making his debut on camera. But Shearer, you mentioned Shearer there, 15 million. That wouldn't buy an average player's toe in 2021, you know. So it just goes to show how things have evolved, isn't it?
Well, when you think, I mean, you have a player at the moment, I suppose the equivalent player to him at the moment would be Harry Kane, probably the closest equivalent. And you're talking 10 times probably what was paid for Shearer, like just to get Harry Kane to, even to get Tottenham to look sideways at you, you're probably talking 10 times that. Like, so yeah, things have changed.
Inflation's a killer.
Yeah.
So I suppose we would have first started following football around the same time, 96-97 season, and on record that was probably the season before that was Newcastle's best season in a long time. And I suppose I remember someone saying before, no one remembers who finishes second, but I think Newcastle are one team that has disproved that, because I think that Kevin Keegan's meltdown with I'd love if we beat them, that's remembered more, I said, anything that United did that season.
Yeah, I think like that season they won 9 out of their first 10 games, I think, in the league, and they were they lost, I think, only 1 out of their first 16. Like, they were miles ahead. And I think the fact that Blackburn had won it the previous year, it kind of, United weren't then what they are, or what they went on to become. They weren't seen as invincible as they were 3 or 4 years later. So it was kind of realistic that Newcastle or Blackburn or whoever, or even maybe Villa went close prior to that. It wasn't outrageous to suggest a provincial club from the Northeast could win the league at that time, and they were spending money as well. Like, they were competing properly with United, but they kind of came out of nowhere. Like, they were in the second division up until the early 90s. And Keegan, in fairness to him, he transformed them. Like, I know they didn't win anything, but yeah, it was a rags to riches story, all right. Yeah.
I think, like, signing Aspria is conceived by many as a turning point in that season. I think that their form nosedived a bit after that.
Yeah.
But 12 points to a 12-point lead. Like, in fairness, all credit to United, they hauled them in well. And I suppose one key game in that season, there's two main ones that's always talked about, but I think United winning 1-0 at St. James's Park with their practically only shot on target, and Schmeichel, an unbelievable performance. That was such an important win. And there is the famous night at Anfield, which, if I had my way, Collymore would have kicked the ball the other way, But we did United. We're always good at doing United favours, but they aren't so good to us when we need them ourselves,
Yeah.
But
United have a knack of not helping Liverpool out. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a second 4-3, which we'll come to in a while there against Liverpool. But that was a killer. It was one of the greatest games of Premier League era, the 4-3, that season with Collymore in the last minute. It kind of, that game summed up why neither team were going to win the league, because they hadn't the defensive solidity to win it. And I suppose it's like the old saying, goals win games, but defenses win championships, and it's a very rare a team that's not good defensively goes on to win the league.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that season, like what really killed them, they were a long way ahead, but they went in the space of a week. They lost 2-0 away to Arsenal, 4-3 away to Liverpool, and they lost 2-1 away to Blackburn after leading that game. But it was really the game at home to United that broke the back in them, I think. Like, I don't remember it well, but looking back and doing my research since, they lost the league by 4 points. They lost home and away to United that season. It boils down to that. If they'd won, if they'd even drawn those two games, they wouldn't have lost all the others, in my opinion. They wouldn't have lost them all. Like, I don't think.
Moving on to the season that we probably don't remember, like, Newcastle gave me one of my favourite memories of football in the first few years following, when he beat United 5-0. There was always a couple of games a season where United got a hammering because the way they played their forward, and you really had to milk it for all it was worth when it did happen, and so I enjoyed that particular game a lot, and I'm guessing you did too, as it after the heart to lose out the beats.
Yeah, again, like, young enough at the time, but still remember it. I've watched it back since. I actually watched the whole match in its entirety a couple of weeks ago, and the thing that struck me, comparing it maybe to nowadays, is the St. James's was absolutely rocking. Like, from the kickoff, I remember it was on Sky, and from the kickoff, you could hardly hear the commentary. It was so loud. Like, even when it was 0-0 early in the time, now they scored early enough, but like, the place was just heaving. Like, the atmosphere at the game was unbelievable. And I think it was worth a goal a game to Newcastle at home. Definitely, like, it's a bit like Liverpool at the moment at Anfield, when the atmosphere is good, especially in Europe. It is worth. It's an extra 20% on top of what you normally. So yeah, that's what I remember distinctly. Like, they got some. I mean, Albert's goal was brilliant, and and all that. But they went after they beat United 5-0. I think they went 7 games without a win or something like that. They went on a horrible run, and that was the end of Keegan. Then he was gone in January. He resigned.
Yeah, well, it was interesting actually, because Kenny Dalglish was in the Sky Sports studio the night of the evening of the 5-0.
That's right, himself and Steve Bruce. Yeah.
Which is also very apt for later on.
Well, it's an interesting juxtaposition in Newcastle's fortunes. Yeah.
But within 2 months, just over 2 months, Kenny was in the hot seat himself at Newcastle. That season, I suppose on paper, Newcastle came second, but Liverpool, being honest, came fourth in a 2-horse race. Liverpool were nip and tuck up to last, completely collapsed in the last 2 games. I remember against Sheffield Wednesday, had Andy Hinchcliffe in goal for the last 10 minutes because he used up all their subs.
Right.
And the goalkeeper got sent off, and they couldn't score in a non-goalkeeper in the last 15 minutes or so, if I remember correctly. And he beat Nottingham Forest 5-0, so he got Champions League ahead of us.
Right,
So I think that position probably flattered Newcastle a bit that season.
I think it did. I think if
Yeah.
you ask any of the hardcore supporters, they'd tell you that there was an upheaval when Keegan left. Like the team was worse, but he made them kind of boring. You know, it was much more pragmatic than what Keegan had been, and I think there's some like Dalglish's time. Looking at it here written down, he bought some great players from Newcastle that went on to have great careers. Like he bought Shea Given, he bought Gary Speed, he bought Nobby Solano, but then he bought Ian Rush and John Barnes. Do you know?
Yeah.
He sold Ferdinand Beardsley, although Beardsley was getting old. He sold Tino Asprilla. He sold Ginola. He sold a lot of the kind of dynamic, kind of creative players, and he bought like, you know, Didi Hamann, Andy Griffin, Nikos Davidas, more pragmatic kind of players, which was more his, you know. So even though like he took us into Europe the following season, which I know we'll get to, and there's a lot of fond memories of him, but it depends on who you ask, I think. I think it depends on who you ask on how he did or how he didn't do. I think that's, you know, the jury is kind of still out almost, you know, but he definitely did bring the team backwards a bit.
I think that it's a theory that his managerial career went backwards after Newcastle. I think that he never had quite the same success he had at Liverpool and Blackburn again. Even to his second tenure at Liverpool, that wasn't overly, apart from he did win the League Cup that I was actually at against Cardiff, but in terms of league placing, it wasn't an overly successful second tenure. So, but on that season, the 4-3 is another 4-3. Lightning struck twice at Anfield. Another 4-3.
I was hoping we'd be able to. I was hoping we'd avoid it. I was hoping you'd forget.
Well, I'll tell you, just again another example why Liverpool or neither team are going to win the league. Defensive solidity wasn't there. Like Liverpool went 3-0 up, and the goals they conceded, David James was responsible for 2 of them. Like you wouldn't see it in an under 10 match in the park on a Sunday morning. The mistakes David James made to give Newcastle back into the match. But Robbie Fowler,
did Warren Parker score one that was particularly soft?
Oh yeah, through the goalie's legs. You know, it was
like that was scandalous. Yeah.
And the Gillespie's goal as well is put it through his hands. But I remember listening to that match on BBC Radio 5 Live, and I remember having to put the radio in a certain position so the
reception.
Yeah, and it was just it wasn't too bad on a Monday night for some reason, but for Saturday it was a nightmare. 3 o'clock kickoff, no BBC Radio, and it's like one extreme to another now. There's too much soccer on the telly back
That's
then.
right, yeah.
Would have loved to, you know, but I remember it was like Liverpool had won the league that moment when Robbie Fowler got the 93rd minute. It was just the frustration of blowing a 3-0 lead, which happened quite regularly as the years went on, but then to get the winning goal, it was a great feeling. But it was those kind of games that if Newcastle had won, if the goal went in at the other end, could have reignited the whole thing, like, you know, the title challenge. But he faded a lot that season, to be honest. But we were on about 4-3s, I suppose. Just you've been on the end of a couple of bad 4-3s, as you've said there, but you've also had some nice ones yourselves on the other side of it. And there was a couple of them. One in particular was that one of Kenny's first games actually against Leicester.
Yeah.
3-1 down at home with 10 minutes to go, and Shearer gets a hat trick to win 4-3.
I remember the third goal was kind of a tap in from about 5 yards, but Newcastle, that was the thing with up until maybe 10 years ago. Newcastle always had that in them. It didn't matter what kind of a team they had. Like back then they had a great side, but even in more recent time when they weren't as good, they always had it in them to just kind of pull something from absolutely nowhere. Like, you know, they were that kind of a team that you'd be turning off the match nearly at half time in a lot of their games.
Yeah.
And then you'd check the score and you'd say, Jesus, they're after coming back from 3-0 down here, like, or something. You know, that happened a lot. A lot of the time they would come back and fall short, but they was always a running them, like.
Well, I was very fond of Newcastle. For that reason. You're a very entertaining team to watch. There was goals. It's very rare to have 0-0 draws with Newcastle, like.
Yeah.
You know, like
until Souness took him over.
Yeah. But in the formative years, you are very exciting to watch, you know, and I would have liked. And they were a popular team. Like you gained a lot of fans, I would say, as well. Like I remember even at St. Ida's training years ago, like our mutual friend Paul Fitzmaurice wearing the grey Newcastle away jersey from the 96 season. Like it caught on, like, and I don't think there's many kids supporting Newcastle now. I would be guessing, but
I
even from
wouldn't
the
think so.
teams,
I mean, I have heard anecdotally even over there in Newcastle, there's kids going around in Man City jerseys and Man United jerseys and Chelsea jerseys, which would never have happened. I mean, that was one of the distinct things. If you turn on a Newcastle match years ago, the whole crowd was wearing a black and white jersey. If you watch a match in the Premiership now, half the crowd are wearing suits. But back then it was a much more working class crowd into these games because the tickets weren't as dear, and
you'd always have a few lads with their shirts off as well and beer bellies in the crowd in Newcastle. They could be biting cold there, and tops are off,
the tattoos across the front as well. Some of them,
bottles of Newcastle brown ale smuggled into the ground, kind of thing,
exactly. But like, in fairness, Kenny, like the following season, then there was highlights to him. That 96, 97 was disappointing, but 97, 98, like cup final, they were in the Champions League. Like, it was all right. Like, most clubs would take it. Like,
Yeah, I remember the Champions League campaign wasn't that memorable, but one of the best moments was the Asprilla hat trick against Barcelona. That was a great. It looked like a great European night. The atmosphere was heaving, and I think he went out in the group stage. That I don't think he many other good results in that, but that particular game, Champions League games at Newcastle, which will come to in a few years' time. There was, some good memories.
They wound up. I think they won. They beat Dynamo Kiev at home as well, but they drew with them. But they lost twice to PSV and they lost away to Barcelona as well.
Yeah.
But it was really it was the cup that year that they got to the final of. But in all honesty, it was a bit of a fluke. Like, they played Everton, I think, and then they didn't play another Premier League team until the final, with the exception of Barnsley, who got relegated, I think.
Yeah, and you're in a relegation battle.
It took them a replay to beat Stevenage. They beat Tranmere, beat Sheffield in the semi-final. So, like, it was a little bit fluky,
Yeah.
But at the same time, they were still at Wembley, and they were never going to win the final, obviously. Like, but
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. It was just very unfortunate. You got to two FA Cup finals in a row, 98 and 99, and they were right in the middle. You're playing teams with unstoppable momentum. Arsenal were going for the double 98. You were the sandwich in United's treble in 99, either side of the league and European Cup. Like, it was two routine 2-0 wins for both of them. Like, it was
they were in my eyes, in hindsight, they were almost as close to unwinnable, I would say, as you could nearly get. Like, I don't think anyone thought they were going to win either of those two finals.
Yeah.
I don't know a single person who would have thought at the time. Certainly over here in Ireland, I don't know a single person who thought Newcastle were going to win either of those two games.
Yeah. No, the momentum is very much with the other two sides on both days, which is a pity, because, like, even you showed me there, Liverpool beat Newcastle in the 74 Cup final, and the open top buses of Newcastle fans that come out in the Gallagate to greet, like, they're a crowd of supporters that really do deserve a trophy, and if I had a choice, or if I had a choice of a team to win something other than Liverpool, I'd actually genuinely would love Newcastle to win something, and like, even the League Cups is one thing. We said it the other night. I don't remember Newcastle going far in the League Cups ever. Like, I can remember Stockport County get to semi-final, but I can never remember Newcastle getting to a League Cup semi-final, which is unusual. I think they should be prioritizing.
They don't have a good record. Yeah, they don't have a good record in League Cups.
I think you had another chance. You were very unlucky in an FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea. It would have been your third FA Cup final in a row had you got there.
Yeah.
You think that was a turning point?
Yeah, that was under, like, Bobby Hullett got sacked at the beginning of that season, and Bobby Robson came in. Now, Newcastle lost 5 of their first 6. The bit of background to that is that the 99 Cup final, like, by that time, Hullett had more or less ostracized certainly Robert Lee and Alan Shearer, I would say. And I've read up since, I mean, had they won that cup final in 99, I'm kind of glad in hindsight they didn't win it, because if they had won it, Shearer would most definitely have left, because, you can imagine if Newcastle won the cup in 99, there'd be a statue of Ruud Hullett outside St. James's now, like, and there wouldn't be a statue. Yeah, and there wouldn't have been a statue of Alan Shearer. Like, that was the club was kind of it was at a pendulum kind of a moment, if that's a word, or a turn point. they lost the first, the next season, the 99-2000 season was a disaster from at the start, and they played Sunderland in the derby. I think it was the 6th game of the season. He left Shearer out of the team.
Yeah,
and I think the press at the time were basically saying like it was the team sheet was tantamount to a suicide note, like that if they lost the game, there was no way. And they lost 2-1. In hindsight, like, thank God they lost, because I do think that Shearer would have gone, like, because Newcastle weren't successful either. They'd had a couple of bad seasons, and bar the cup final appearances, it had been pretty depressing for the previous 18 months. So in a roundabout way, losing the final in 99 was a good thing, because it kept Alan Shearer, it brought in Bobby Robson, and in my opinion, the best part of my time supporting Newcastle was subsequent to that. He did sign some good players. He signed Kieran Dyer. In fairness to Hullett, he signed. He was a good highlight. But Robson's first game, they lost away at Chelsea, but they were very unlucky to lose it, and they won 8-0 at home to Sheff Wed, and Shearer got 5 that day. And they finished 11th, scored 63 goals actually that season. They were the 3rd highest scorers in the league, even though they finished 11th. So that'll tell you how bad they were at the back.
Yeah,
when they scored 63. But yeah, the FA Cup highlights: beat Spurs 6-1 away in a replay. Beat Sheffield 4-1. They scored a load of goals under Robson. He made them into a very entertaining team straight away. But yeah, lost semi-final 2-1 to Chelsea. I remember Gus Payet scoring a header. It was at Wembley, and I do think they would have won that one if they had got to the. No disrespect to Villa. Villa were a good side. I think they finished 5th or 6th in the league that year. Villa were a good side, but
well, again, David James showed you what you're missing. Like, with another howler to give Chelsea the FA Cup. So I think you'd have definitely won.
I think if Robson's team had got there, they would have pulled it off. Because they weren't a terrible side. You know what I mean? On paper, they would have been able for Villa. Do you know what I mean? Like, on paper,
they would have won that, I'd say.
I think they probably would have. And that's no disrespect to Villa. Villa were a good side, but I think Newcastle, if there was a team of destiny that year, it probably would have been Newcastle had they got to the final, I think, because the previous 2 years were write-offs, like,
Yeah, I would agree.
But yeah, that was probably the start of the best time I've had. I mean, I remember this, now this would have been like, I would have been 12, 13, 14, 15, kind of in the Robson years. And like, that's the age when you're absolutely living and sleeping and breathing it. Like, you're reading Match Magazine every week, and you're following every last thing that's gone on, because it was that was kind of pre-social media. So you really had to go out of your way to follow it, especially from Ireland. Like, if you were living in England, you could go to the games, you'd know what's going on. But here, like, we had teletext and Match Magazine, that was the size of it,
Airtel waiting for the screen to reload there, like, and damn,
that's right, yeah.
An equalizer again.
Exactly. So the following season, then from then on, they took off really. They were very good from around that time on.
Yeah, and I think this is one of my favorite kind of times watching Newcastle as well with Bobby Robson. Like, he made you into a top 4 club again. Just in 2001, 2002, you mentioned 4-3 a while ago. There was 2 great 4-3 wins. One was against our old friends United.
Yes.
When Shearer and Keane had a bit of a dust up.
That's right.
And against Leeds, similar enough, I think you came 3-1 down as well that day to win 4-3.
Away at Leeds, Boxing Day, down 3-1 after 56 minutes. And then Robbie Elliott on 59 with a diving header. I remember it like it was yesterday. Shearer then scored, I think it was a penalty. And then Solano, it was a great through ball. I think it was, I could be wrong about this, but it might have been Gary Speed played a great through ball for Solano, and he just rolled it into the bottom left corner, because Nigel Martin had the shortest arms I've ever seen.
Short and Pickford, I'd say. But
exactly.
Ian Hart, I think Ian Hart didn't cover himself in glory for that 4th goal as well.
He got bored. But that was the thing with Ian Hart. Like, even as Irish supporters, we knew that. Like, if the ball went the wrong side of him, it was all over. He was as slow as a funeral. Like, and
I think that season, if I remember correctly, it was the Arsenal game at St. James's. He lost that, and Bergkamp got that unbelievable goal. It was a brilliant finish. Like, it was kind of a deft touch, and that was a real Arsenal won their last 10 or 11 games.
Yeah.
And that was Liverpool had a good run that year as well. They came within 6 or 7 points of winning it and finished above United. Yeah. But Arsenal were sublime that year. Like, they were unstoppable.
Arsenal were ahead of Newcastle. They had players like Tony Adams, Sol Campbell, Bergkamp, Ray Parlour, they were just way more seasoned. Newcastle were too young, and they were green. Like, they had speed and they had Shearer and they had Shea Given and that, but they were just that bit green. Like, they were never, in hindsight, they nearly won the league in a kind of a roundabout way, but like realistically, they probably never were going to win it. They were coming from nowhere, like with too young a team.
I think top four is about right.
Yeah,
really for them, because Liverpool were competitive as well that year as well. So the following season, another top four finish was secured. But the main highlight of that, and it counts one of your best ever memories, of the Champions League run, where you set a record where you became the first team to qualify for the group stage, or for the second group stage as it was then, after losing the first 3 games.
Yeah.
And the pinnacle of that was the Feyenoord match in the last group game.
Yeah, my memory of that, like, I mean, this now, like, you're right in my wheelhouse here now. Like, I remember these games clearly, because that time the Champions League was on Irish television. It was on TV3 a lot.
Yeah.
And I think for the lack of a better game to show, they used to just throw Newcastle on.
Yeah.
Because if United and Liverpool weren't playing, they'd show Newcastle. That was more or less the way it was on Irish television. And they lost. I remember them losing away to Kiev. This guy up front, they had, his name was Shatskich. He always scored. He was deadly for Kiev for a few years. He scored twice. Then they lost 1-0 at home to Feyenoord, a deadly volley. I can't remember who got it. I think it was, his name was Pardew, Ruben Pardew, if you remember him. He scored a volley. Yeah. And then they lost 2-0 away to Juventus. Del Piero got 2 goals. I think the local constabulary were fairly rough with the Newcastle supporters that night, I believe. They beat Juventus at home, then 1-0. Andy Griffin, kind of scrappy enough goal. You touched off to Buffon a little bit on the way in, but I think Andy Griffin won't have anyone take it off him. They beat Kiev 2-1 at home. I don't have as good a memory of that one. I suspect that wasn't shown live on Irish television. That's probably why I don't remember it as well. And we didn't have Sky in the house that time. And then the one I do remember, and without a shadow of a doubt, the best memory I have of supporting Newcastle was away to Feyenoord. They won 3-2. But what I remember about that was, there's funny anecdotes have come out since about, Newcastle went up 2-0 cruising. Craig Bellamy scored. Shearer flicked on a header. Bellamy ran through a lovely left-footed finish into the bottom corner. Past the keeper's name was Van Wanderen, I think. And
he went wandering around for the third goal. We'll come to that.
He did, yeah. He wasn't great. None of them Dutch teams could defend very much. They were well outscored in Dutch teams, but they couldn't defend. But anyway, then a ball fell. I think early in the, it was 1-0 at halftime. Right before halftime, Bellamy scored, and then just early in the second half, a ball fell to Hugo Viana. Who, funny story about him, but I'll get to it in a minute. Viana took a ball down on his left knee and volleyed it, bent it into the bottom corner. It was a fantastic goal. And then it wouldn't be Newcastle without some sort of catastrophe happening in the middle of it. And ball came through to Bombarda, I think was his name. And he fired it low past Given. Soft enough goal. Like every Newcastle, they gave away bad goals from time to time. And then Lurling scored, but I remember the commentary. Well, watching it in hindsight, I watched it live on TV3. It was Trevor Welch, if you remember him. But the English commentary, I think it was on. It was John Champion, and I remember when Bombarda scored, he said, like, oh, Newcastle, be careful, and you could see Robson was like freaking out in the dugout, because he was saying, like, the game, like, Newcastle were cruising, absolutely cruising, and Feyenoord had hardly had a shot, and next thing, ball fell to a guy named Lurling, and he volleyed it in, and that was 2-2. And I thought, that's it, now we're going to go. Not only are we not going to go, but they're probably going to bait us down top of it, like I thought.
Yeah.
And long, harmless, straight ball, 92nd minute, Shearer flicked it on, Dyer ran through, clean through, ball kind of bounced up, hit him here on the chest, he went past the last man, 1-on-1 with the keeper, and he hit it not straight at him, but close enough to him. He could have scored easily enough, and thanks be to God he didn't hold on to it, and Bellamy came in, and even at that, Bellamy hit the ball pretty much into the goalkeeper's stomach, I remember, and it bounced off him and went into the side of the net. But the Newcastle fans, the story they tell is, of course, like, the place was wedged, as you can imagine. Like, Newcastle would carry huge numbers to those away games, but Feyenoord have some connection with Sunderland of some sort. And there was a load of Sunderland. But there was a load of Sunderland flags in the Feyenoord section right next to the Newcastle supporters. And like the Feyenoord crowd were fairly rowdy by all accounts, and it got pretty hostile there. But you can imagine how hostile it got when Bellamy scored.
Yeah.
But about Hugo Viana, there's a story about him that, you know, the way Robson used to manage in Portugal. The legend goes that Newcastle had first refusal on Sporting Lisbon's players, and Portugal had won the European, or maybe the World Under-20 World Cup that summer prior, and we had a choice of Cristiano Ronaldo or Hugo Viana, and we chose Hugo Viana.
Yeah.
You know, now I don't know if that's 100% true, but I have read it and heard it. So thanks, Hugo Viana, for costing me Cristiano Ronaldo. Sounds like
Yeah. Jeez, top of back at the wrong horse there, like, you know.
talk about a fucking disaster. Yeah.
Yeah. Newcastle went out in the next group with Inter Milan and Barcelona and Leverkusen, wasn't it? That was the group.
That's right. Yeah, they lost 4-1 at home to Inter Milan the first game. Bellamy got sent off that night for I'm not sure that he headbutt Marco Materazzi, but he had some incident with Marco Materazzi. So yeah. Materazzi had form for that sort of stuff ever before he met Zinedine Zidane.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you're a great.
So they went out anyway. Yeah.
Bellamy and Shearer were a great partnership. They were great to watch. They didn't always get on too well, but
no,
by all accounts, but there was a good. But the Champions League, the defeat to Partizan Belgrade in the following season's playoffs, that was a kind of a turning point, you were saying, because it resulted in the lack of revenue that they were banking on, led to Jonathan Woodgate leaving.
Exactly. They signed Woodgate midway through the previous season, because I think they thought in 02-03, I think they thought they could win the league. No, they were wrong. They finished 14 points behind United, I think, that year. They were well off the pace in the finish. But they were deservedly up there at the same time. Like, they were in the mix, like, until United beat them 6-2 at St. James's, and that finished it. But, you know, Paul Scholes scored a hat-trick again. Sound Paul Scholes always seemed to destroy Newcastle. They lost. They beat Partizan Belgrade away 1-0, and then they lost 1-0 at home to them, and they went out in penalties. I think Newcastle missed the first 3 penalties and still took it to sudden death penalties. However, they managed it. Got to the UEFA Cup semi-final though that season. But back to the Partizan Belgrade thing. What really killed them there was the Woodgate signing. I think they paid about 9.5-10 million from. That was more or less a bet that they were going to make the Champions League again, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And when they didn't make it, when they got knocked out in the playoff, they sold him pretty much straight after that to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if money was tight, but I do know that definitely when it came to a couple of seasons later, when they were signing players like Michael Owen, I know money was tight at that stage. So I think they had backed Robson pretty significantly, even though he didn't spend huge money on any one player. He spent a nice bit on a good few players. And I think once that gravy train kind of halted a little bit, because the UEFA Cup, you know, pales in comparison financially.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I think cuts had to be kind of made. No, I'm not certain that that's true, but Lee Bowyer came in that season, I think, on a free. His contract with Leeds ended. And that was the only major kind of signing that came in that summer, as far as I know. So that's kind of a sign that the belt was tightening a little bit, like, you know. Yeah. I know, but they had a good squad as well. They didn't need a lot of players either, you know. But it was, So they got to the UEFA Cup semi-final that year, and Didier Drogba knocked them out. They lost 2-0 to Marseille on aggregate in the semi-final. Again, had they got to the final, I think Marseille lost to Valencia in that final, I'm pretty sure, in 04.
Rafa was probably manager, and Rafa plays a key role in both our clubs' journeys.
Absolutely,
after that, which we'll come to. But I think that season you missed out. Speaking of Istanbul, in the following season, Liverpool pipped Newcastle to the top 4 that season. I think that laid the foundations for a steady decline for Newcastle and helped Liverpool get back into the Champions League, which obviously ended in Istanbul 12 months later. I think
as well, just before you come on to that there, I think Abramovich coming into Chelsea at around the same time, that really knocked Newcastle out of it. You know, because there was United and Arsenal were always going to be in the top 4. And it was kind of Liverpool, Newcastle, and whoever was the also-ran that would come up in 4th or 5th. But Chelsea displaced Newcastle just at the right time when the Champions League money became massive. and then a gap started, kind of a fissure opened up between that top 4 clubs and everybody else around that time. I think that's fair to say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say it was, and I suppose Liverpool are responsible for that as well to a certain extent, because
A little bit, yeah.
the final game of the season before, Abramovich wasn't going to buy Chelsea unless they were guaranteed Champions League, and we played in a winner takes all last game of the season at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea, and Chelsea won. And Good Johnson, if I remember correctly, or Gronkjaer got a goal for Chelsea to win, and Abramovich ended up buying the club then not long after. So sorry about that.
Sound, no bother. Appreciate it. Well,
The
that's all the good stuff out of the way.
Yeah,
that's all the good stuff.
That's kind of
that's all the positive out of the way.
Yeah, it's far from Champions League nights against Barcelona or title challenges from here on in, unfortunately. So
yeah, we should be able to get through the rest of it pretty quickly.
Yeah, mid-table obscurity kind of became the norm then. Like Bobby Robson, he signed a lot of players that they're probably past it, being honest. Like an injury-prone Patrick Kluivert being one, Michael Owen as well. You know, on paper these were good signings, but it was kind of like a holiday camp. He never got the best out of him.
Yeah, I think like Robson got sacked. So what the preface to that was, I think Freddie Shepherd was the chairman at the time, and he came out and said this will be Bobby Robson's last season prior to the season kicking off, which he may as well have sacked him then when he said that, in my opinion, because you're totally undermining the authority, you know. And there was the one thing I will just wanted to get out there was, I think there's this narrative that Robson lost the dressing room and couldn't handle these young players like Bellamy and Dyer and, you know, Lauren Robert, the Brat Pack they were called at that time. That's not really true. Were those fellas lively boys? Did they like the night out? Yes. But that stuff was going on when Newcastle were winning.
Yeah.
But like everything, it's only when the results start to go a little bit that this stuff starts to get out.
Yeah, it's like Man United, Liverpool, the Spice Boys. Like the difference was United players party just as much as Liverpool players did that time.
United were winning.
But they were winning leagues, so that stuff is forgotten about. The fact that Liverpool didn't win the league that time and cream shorts, and which was a joke, like at Wembley. That's when you get the stuff thrown at you. Like if you win, everything is forgotten about, and that's a good example.
The one thing they did do, they signed James Milner, who was a good player for Newcastle. You know, they also signed, you know, they sold Woodgate, Speed, Griffin, who was a good servant in Newcastle. Gary Speed had been a great servant in Newcastle. Lua left. Viana went out on loan. Bellamy had a fell out with Souness. He was left go in January to Celtic on loan, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Dyer and Boyer had their fight on the pitch. Souness came in the 13th of September that season.
Yeah, and, I was just going to say, if there's one enduring moment in Souness's reign, it's like the cringe-worthy photo opportunity where Boyer and Dyer were shaking hands to make up after fighting on the pitch and getting sent off. He finished that game with eight players that day, was it? Against Aston Villa. I think Boyer and Dyer got sent off for fighting each other.
Yeah, Titus Bramble. No, was it Titus Bramble got sent? Yeah, I think it was Titus Bramble got sent off for handball on the line, or was it Stephen Taylor? No, it was Titus Bramble. That was before Stephen Taylor's time. And I think the story goes that Bramble went into the dressing room and had his shower, you know, because he was sent off early in the time.
Yeah.
Came out the shower anyway, and next thing Boyer and Dyer come in. And he was thinking, Jesus, nice one. I'm off the hook here. Like, no one's going to say a word to me now.
Yeah, no, that kind of slightly overshadowed it there, like, you know, or kind of paled in comparison. Like if you ended the game with 8 players in FIFA 98, or when the FIFA games, the match should be postponed straight away, like to be walkover given. So it's amazing to finish the game, you know.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a team go down to 8 players in person in my life. In all the matches I've ever been at in person, I'm not sure. I've seen maybe 9, but never 8. I don't think.
But for 2 to get sent off for fighting each other, it's farcical, like, you know. But
I know, yeah,
humorous as well, to be fair. But
well, look, Souness. So for wider context, Souness was pretty unanimously disliked by the supporters, I would say.
Yeah,
I just think he had this thing where he'd come in, he'd frighten the living daylights out of everybody, and he'd get a reaction, and he'd start off okay, but then once the roaring and shouting starts to wear off, like that stops working after a while. I think I know myself from doing it myself that you can't do it that way. You can't roar and shout all day, every day, because it just, people tune it out and they stop listening. And yeah, I think that was a part of it, that it just, he became, players just got sick of him. Like, and I think when he came in, there was this kind of thing that he was going to kind of come in and sort out these fellas like Craig Bellamy and, you know, whatever. But like, his version of sorting out was just to sell these guys. Like, that was more or less his, you know, his way of dealing with things, you know. He lasted that season, and about halfway through, I think 56 games he got before he got the boot in February. And it wasn't before time, because they were really struggling when he got sacked, you know.
It was around that time where a certain Cockney with a sports company began to gain an ownership.
Yeah, I think it was, there was rumors around this was 05, 06, I think. When Souness got sacked and Roder took over. Mike Lohan came in that summer for big money. Emre came in, Parker. He left Jennings go. Lauren Rivera went out on loan. Milner went out on loan. So Souness did his best to get rid of all the good players, basically. He had Shearer and Owen for that season. Went well. Owen got injured at Tottenham, and I think they lost 3-0 away to City. Souness got sacked. Roder came in. But it was in 07 when Ashley bought the club. Glenn Roder, just a quick one before I get to the Mike Ashley stuff. Glenn Roder did really, really well for Newcastle. I think because
passed away recently.
Yes, that's right. And he had played for Newcastle. He was a captain. He understood the club. He was an academy manager and got promoted when Souness got fired. Did really well. Got them up to 7th at the end of that season. They went on a great run. I think they won like 10 of their last 13 games. And it was one of my most enjoyable periods, actually, supporting Newcastle, because Souness's time was so awful, you know.
Yeah.
And when he was interviewed after matches, he would blame the ref, he would blame injuries, he would blame God only knows what. And, you know, he came across very bitter, you know. If anything went wrong, it was never his fault and stuff like that. So he was really, really hard to like, Souness. So the following season, Roder got more or less the whole season. They weren't doing well. They finished 13th. And Allardyce came in. And it was around that time, in May 2007, when Mike Ashley bought John Hall's stake. I have it written down here, 41.6% share of the club for £55 million. I think he would eventually complete that for 135 million in total. Damien Duff arrived around that time. I think in the summer before Roder got sacked, and Martins came in. But Roder was he wasn't backed. Souness was backed. Signings like Michael Owen were big money. Albert Luque was another one he brought in for big money. And as I said, I think the money was tight, because there was debt in the club. There was a lot. When Mike Ashley bought the club, he didn't do his due diligence, and there was a lot of debt there. And I think the club they weren't quite Leeds United, but I'd say they weren't a million miles off it. You know, the way they were. It was just that they were relatively successful was keeping it above water, I think.
Just a quick one to Michael Owen there. Michael Owen has gone on record saying he didn't actually want to go to Newcastle. He wanted to be re-signed by Liverpool, but Newcastle just blew them over the water with the offer, and they couldn't turn. Liverpool weren't going to match that. You know, for a player.
I think did he meet with Rafa Benitez and they kind of had it agreed, and then Newcastle basically bid double what Liverpool were bidding, or something.
Something like around that. So like Michael Owen's heart wasn't in Newcastle at all. Like when he was playing for them, which probably would explain.
Well, it was pretty obvious from the way he kind of carried himself in his time there. I mean, the worst of it was, like, I'm kind of fast forwarding a little here. The following the 07-08 season, Allardyce got sacked in January. Keegan came back, and turned the side around a little bit. They were improving towards the end of that season. They wound up finishing 12th, you know, and they were going reasonably okay under Keegan, but realistically, he was used of in his day of getting what he wanted. You know, he came from the ilk of manager like Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, where they ran the club from top to bottom. That was never going to fly under Mike Ashley. Now, of course, he wouldn't have known that, because Ashley didn't have the club that long. And in the beginning, Mike Ashley was kind of going along with it. He was in the stand drinking pints with the fans, if you remember. He was wearing the jersey and
the white shirt, black pants, wouldn't it?
Stuff that's pretty, you know, unbecoming of a billionaire owner of a football club. But anyway, Keegan didn't last long. I think it's September of 2008, so he only really a couple of games into the first season.
Can I ask, how did that make you feel, Keegan leaving? You know, because that was the second time he'd left, and it was kind of a surprise. Like, like Keegan always struck me as a manager, and even at Liverpool, he walked out of Liverpool after winning the European Cup because he wanted money to Hamburg. But he always struck me as a manager like that. He never, you couldn't rely on him.
Yeah, I think
even with England, even the going got tough, he'd bowl,
I think, look, obviously he's loved in Newcastle because he took them from the second division up, and made them a title contending team. But they did spend a lot of money as well, in the 90s. Like, they were like, if he wanted a player. So the way it works in Newcastle that time, it was decisions were made kind of, in my opinion, in a very populist kind of a way. So if the fans went outside the ground and asked for something, they usually got it. So Keegan would spit his dummy out if he didn't get a player, and he'd say it publicly, the club aren't backing me.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I remember about Keegan speaking in front of the fans, I loved the passion he showed when they sold Andy Cole to United, and he came out and he spoke in front of the fans and spoke to them, look, we're trying to get someone else, and
yeah,
I like that about him, it's passion. But
his best years were a bit before my time, so I kind of he did he put Newcastle on a level playing field pretty much. Yeah. So he did put them they were one of the best teams in Europe probably on paper at that time, and the second time around, to be fair to him, I don't think he was the same man himself anyway before he ever arrived. I don't think. And also, he was used of being allowed to, I think if Keegan came in and you said to him, this is your budget's, £50 million for the sake of argument for the year, spend it however you like. I think he would he would have got Newcastle into the top 6 again. I'm pretty sure he would. But that was never going to, he realized very quickly there was signings being made from underneath him, or from above him, I should say, by Dennis Wise and Derek Lambias and Tony Jimenez. And once he saw that and his power was being undermined, he just walked. And I actually think I don't think he was right to walk the first time, but I think he was dead right to walk the second time. Yeah. Put it that way.
Well, I think it's in life as well as they say you should never go back. Be it to go back to a team for a second go, even with Kenny coming back the second time with Liverpool, it rarely works out. It's like the saying, you should never reheat cold soup, and that's what they say. But it was sad. It was when I heard Keegan got the Newcastle job as a neutral, I was delighted. I memories it was like, but
and so were the supporters. I think they were playing a cup game against Stoke that day or the following day, and they had only 20,000 seats sold or something like that. 25,000 tickets sold for the Stoke game in the cup.
Yeah,
they sold 20,000 more tickets in one day.
Yeah. Well, he's a legend, and he's a very identifiable kind of people identify well with him. And just while on about Kevin, I know of, it's just a funny mention, I actually know of a guy called Kevin Keegan in Cork.
Okay.
And he's wherever he goes to Newcastle, he always gets treated very well because of his name, it's points and stuff, bought for him. And he was saying at the airport once, he came out over I think he was late for a flight. And, they call over, it happened to me once or twice, they call you over, can such and such make their way to the boarding gate as the flight's about to leave. Can Kevin Keegan make his way to the boarding gate? There's a big deluge of people going over to Delhi in case they think it's Kevin Keegan, But so his replacement not long after was one of our own, well, a generational one of our own, maybe as a grandparent. And I suppose it was the JFK that season was no longer John F. Kennedy. It was Joe fucking Kinnear. That was he didn't hold any punches in his press conferences, Joe, did he?
No, his opening press conference was fairly colourful. I mean, anyone that's watching this can do their research, I guess. But he had a few words with I think it was Simon Bird was writing for, I could have this wrong, but I think he might have been writing for the Mail at the time. I could be wrong about that, but it was definitely Simon Bird anyway that he had a fairly good old go off of. And yeah, his post-match press conferences and stuff were a thing of beauty. He came out with some absolute belters in press conferences.
It kept the guy with the censor button in the BBC or Sky Sports busy anyway. He gave him the undercard.
The man that was doing the closed captioning was having a heart attack trying to put in all the stars to cover out the letters. Yeah.
But no, it's with Joe Kinnear was I remember him being a pundit. He was now and again an RTE, and he was Wimbledon manager. I liked him, and I suppose he knew Dunphy and Giles as well. You know,
Right.
he played soccer with him, and he probably would say he was capped 26 times for Era. I think that was like an après match.
That's
joke,
right.
You can picture him saying that, like catching 6 times for Era. But I suppose his health got to him in the end. I think he left for health reasons that season. I think.
He'd heart problems, I think.
Yeah. That season was to end in relegation for Newcastle, and it was a pity that Alan Shearer was manager when it was confirmed. He just go over as a caretaker. How did you feel when that happened? Obviously gutted, but
oh my God, it was like the world had just ended. Like,
yeah. Chris Hughton, I felt got a bit of a raw deal from Newcastle. Like, he took over, and he bounced straight back up. You know, in fairness.
So before they went down, like Shearer, I think wanted to stay on, but Mike Ashley basically didn't answer his calls for the whole summer, more or less, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
And knowing what we know now, that's not surprising. Also, that summer, Sir Bobby Robson died on the 31st of July, 2009, which was, you know, for Newcastle fans, getting relegated was bad, but Sir Bobby dying was
a double whammy, that, isn't it? But just skipping forward, I suppose, too, I remember the season. I remember Liverpool spent 35 million on a man on the basis of one match. I would say it was, in fairness, he played well that game and he got a great goal. He beat us 3-1.
That's right, I remember it.
When Roy Hodgson was manager.
I think that was Pardew's first game, you know.
Could be right, yeah.
I think it was, yeah.
And Pardew had lasted longer than the average, but I remember you were saying, you know, whatever about relegation, and that the fact that they let Andy Carroll go on transfer deadline day and didn't replace him kind of was a telltale sign for you that.
Well, I think that was kind of where I drew the line. So I was like an avid follower. I still watch the games occasionally after that, but that kind of killed it took away the romanticism, because the hope was then gone. It meant they were going back to selling Waddle, selling Gascoigne, selling Beardsley. It was back to that, do you know? And although they were a Premier League club in name, they were only a Premier League club in name. You know, they had the attitude of a small club again when Mike Ashley, and
I'll tell you this, you know, from back the clock, you could gladly keep him. You know what I mean? I'm very glad to give him back.
But I think it wasn't like, look, Andy Carroll was a good player for Newcastle, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was that selling him, I've no problem. If you said to me this minute, and we're going to get onto this now, because I mean, all these seasons from here on pretty much mold into one another. There's much remarkable to talk about. The Ashley thing with me is like, he tried certain stuff. He tried to change the name of the ground. He treated Kevin Keegan very badly. He treated Alan Shearer very badly. Their treatment of Jonas Gutierrez was horrendous. After he was diagnosed with cancer, like, they basically ostracized him so that he wouldn't get, I think it was, they didn't play him for ages so he wouldn't get an appearance bonus in his contract. I think he took him to court and won. Yeah, it was scandalous. Like,
the way Ashley treats workers as sports rep, apparently. Which is different thing. So it kind of makes sense if he's like that. That would tie in with that.
And you know, like the Andy Carroll thing, like, again, it's not that it's Andy Carroll, it's not that. It's what it symbolizes of, we're going to sell our best players and we're going to, you know, as cheaply as possible, keep it ticking over. We'll finish 17th every year. And that's been the trend since. Now, I know they went down one time. Benitez came in, kind of revived the club. I'm kind of skipping a lot of time here. I realize I'm skipping most of the Pardew years, but there wasn't much remarkable. They finished 5th one season under him. I never liked him. I thought he was very arrogant. I thought his remarks in the press were ridiculous. He blamed some unbelievable stuff for losing games. It was just like unbelievable. I remember one time Newcastle, I think, lost to Southampton, and he said, we lost, you know, Southampton produce better academy players because there's more middle-class people living in Southampton. So therefore, they should have a better academy than us. So therefore, ergo, that's why we lost to them.
Yeah, because the average soccer player in England is really good as middle class, like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to
yeah.
me.
The
But like,
more generally, the more working class. That's why Liverpool is good, because
exactly.
the more working class the city.
It's the same reason why Bobby Charlton and Jack Charlton and Paul Gascoigne and Peter Beardsley, Chris Waddle, Michael Carrick, Alan Shearer, you name them, they all came from Newcastle, like, because they're all sons of coal miners and dock
Yeah,
workers and the very same, But
yeah.
anyway, don't get me started.
I
But
remember you were saying about Pardew, where you were saying that if Pardew goes to a club, that they end up being Pardewed after a while.
that's
Like
right.
it
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
verb, you know.
What used to happen was a bit like, okay, so we're going to come to this in a minute because the Bruce thing, but Pardew, Souness, McLaren to a lesser degree. But I leave McLaren out of it. Pardew particularly, Bruce, Allardyce. You could say, there's probably other managers on that kind of merry-go-round, as we call it. They'd go into a club. They'll do all right in the beginning. They're likeable, affable fellas. The chairman, they'll get money out of the chairman because the chairman will get on with them.
Yeah,
And then results will start going bad and it'll be everyone else's fault, more or less. And we'll get to Steve Bruce in a minute, but like that was Pardew all out. Now, one thing what I will say about him was he at least had a plan A. He knew how to set a team up and made them kind of difficult to beat, and they would nick a win,
yeah.
and also he had some fantastic players. Like he had Chick Tiote, Kabai, Ben Arfa, Papis Cisse, Demba Ba, like just
I'd never want to hear
fantastic
that name
players.
ever again, Dimba Go away.
Yeah, sorry
Yeah.
about it again. But they had
I'm getting
some,
post-traumatic stress
like he had
flashbacks here.
some,
Like,
yeah, he had some fantastic players at his disposal. I mean, he had crack inside, like. But I never thought he was. I mean, the better manager would have got more out of that team. But that's neither here nor there. But he, I used to have this thing about him that as a kind of a coach myself, I used to watch the games and like we'd be down 2-0 at home, half an hour to go, and he'd take off a left back and bring on another left back or something like that, and that would be his tactical change to bring us back into the game. Like anyone else would bring on maybe a third striker or something, but no, we're gonna we're gonna take off our right back and bring on another right back, and that'll get us back in it.
yeah,
So
that's
he
really
never
what
knew how
changed.
to affect the game from the dugout. He could never change a game while it was going on. But like his plan A was okay.
I'm glad you
And
mentioned Chuck Teo there, because I forgot to mention about classic games that Newcastle had under Pardew. He had the best comeback in Premier League history, I would say.
that's right.
4-0 down against Arsenal and came
Yeah.
back draw 4-4, and Chuck Tiote got a screamer from outside the box to tie it off. It was a goal befitting of the greatest comeback, Another super goal
Yeah.
was another brilliant goal. I'm just going to reference here, was that season he came fifth under Pardew. Papis Cisse against Chelsea.
Oh, yeah, away
Stamford
to
Bridge.
Chelsea, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
they beat
was
Chelsea 2-0 that night, I think. He actually scored the first goal was a brilliant goal as well. The first goal gets totally forgotten. The first goal was a great goal, but the second one, right in front of the Newcastle fans as well, in the corner of Stamford. But
yeah.
the
That
way,
was
I don't know why Chelsea do this, and Liverpool are the same, where they let the away fans on the ground level behind the goals. I don't know why they do that. If it was me, I'd put them as far away up in the corner as possible. I know Newcastle and
Yeah.
they do that at Old Trafford as well, I think.
Yeah, the Liverpool fans have the away, or the Liverpool at Anfield, the away fans are behind the goals as well. The worst possible view of the ground is in the corner at the minute, like, before they do it up. But.
Right. I never thought that was a great idea. I always thought if you were the away team and you could hear your own fans on the pitch, it was never, it was an advantage to you. I thought the further away, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But that goal, I remember Cisse was in that kind of corner where the Newcastle fans were. So he only had to go 20 yards to celebrate with them. And of course they were going mad.
Yeah, it was a great goal. Now, moving on, I suppose, Rafa, one thing we definitely both have in common anyway, both Liverpool and Newcastle fans, and you and me personally as well, we both have a huge scraw and a soft spot for Rafa Benitez. And I remember thinking, when you got him as manager, what a signing as a manager that was for Newcastle. If ever there was a statement of intent to get Rafa Benitez, in my opinion, he's one of the greatest tacticians that I've seen a manager club anyway. And, I think things didn't work out for Real Madrid. Like, he's not really a man manager as such. Steven Gerrard has said that quite clearly. He's quite cold, and he wouldn't really get involved in people's personal lives. Like, he's a bit standoffish, but he's Another reason, I suppose there are different footballing reasons here, but Rafa getting £96,000 to the Hillsborough Memorial Fund as well, which kind of gives you an insight into the character of the man. You know, I have great time for Rafa Benitez myself, and I was delighted that when he came back to the Premiership and Newcastle and managed Newcastle, and he'll always have there'll be a special place in every Liverpool fan's heart for Rafa after Istanbul. He's one manager I wouldn't be devastated if we lost to, and I'm guessing you have similar fondness for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, just for, he actually approached Newcastle, would you believe? And Newcastle were on the verge of sacking McLaren. Now, a bit like the current situation with Steve Bruce, which we'll get to. Yeah. They didn't want to sack McLaren, I don't think. I think the season they very nearly got relegated the year before. They stayed up in the last day. John Carver was in temporary charge, which was a total disaster. They sacked McLaren because basically what happened was the fans had, at this stage, the fans were so sick of the regime running the club, I think, that, and also to be fair, like there's this thing that Newcastle fans get this stick that they hound out managers. Like Rafa Benitez wasn't hounded out because he was good. Bobby Robson wasn't, Now, whilst with that said, the last game of Bobby Robson, Bobby Robson's last home game in the second last season before he got sacked, some of the fans left early in the last home game in the lap of honour, and I think if they had their time back again, they wouldn't have, because they finished fifth. It was a bit of a disappointment. And I think that this thing of Newcastle fans being tagged with they expect to be in the, this narrative the English have of, Newcastle fans expect, the mainstream media, Sky Sports, BT, TalkSport, all the rest of it. That, I think, comes from that time where Newcastle fans were expectant, but they were expectant because they had a good side, It would be like, I'm sure if Arsenal finish 10th in the table, their fans won't be happy about it. I wouldn't blame them when you consider what they're spending. So I think that's where that tag came from. But Benitez came in. Benitez was adored by the supporters because he was good at his job. And it was so obvious that he was good at his job. And McLaren was basically, they played Bournemouth in a home game. They lost 2-1 to them. And like the fans that day, the whole, you're getting sacked in the morning, you're taking us down. You can't come back from that as a coach. You can't. I'm speaking for myself, for instance. If someone's shouting that at you and you're in the dugout on Sunday, you can't go into training the following morning and command respect. You just, it's over once that happens. Once the hardcore support turn on you, you're finished.
Yeah, the one exception to that, unfortunately, was Ferguson with the banner saying "Tara Fergie," like, if only, I wish he'd taken that to heart. But anyway,
but I think he was, you see, I think the thing like that with McLaren, the club just weren't going to sack him. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think they were. I think they would have gone down with him, and they have this kind of idea that, if we rock the boat, it could have, because they replaced, they brought in Shearer for 9 games and got relegated. And then the second time they sacked McLaren and brought in Benitez, and they still got relegated. But there was only like 10 games left, and they were as good as down. Newcastle were well in the bottom 3.
Yeah, we couldn't be.
And he nearly kept them up.
Yeah. I remember Steven Gerrard made a very good point. I think he obviously walked championship the year after. He came up straight away.
Yeah.
Right. But remember, Gerrard made a very good point as a pundit. And obviously himself and Rafa didn't obviously eye to eye or whatever. They did different ideas, and he was falling a bit cold, but he made a point that Newcastle were a championship club with a Premiership manager at the time, and Rafa worked wonders keeping in the league for a couple of years, I think one of your low points, I will come to, suppose, the highs and lows, and to summarise all this in a while, but one of the low points for you was when they didn't give Rafa the backing, and
I think it was probably the lowest point in terms of, so I disengaged somewhat in terms of day-to-day supporting and following it closely. When I kind of realised around the time of Alan Pardew being hired that it wasn't that I detested Alan Pardew day one. Like, you'd always give a fella a chance. It wasn't that. It was more that it was clear the direction and the attitude and the lack of ambition the club were now showing. And I couldn't go along with that, mainly because I know, or at that time anyway, Newcastle were generating the kind of money commercially where they should have been competing in the top half anyway.
Yeah.
They're I think even to this day, if you go by the Delight Money League or whatever, Newcastle are still one of the richest clubs in terms of generating money in Europe. So I don't have an issue if Newcastle wanted to run on a sustainable model, like we'll just say Leicester City run, where they sell their best player for 50 million, they buy 2 players for 25 million, and they move on to next year. I'd have no issue with that whatsoever, none whatsoever. Because look, we don't all have, the money that City have or the money that Chelsea have or United have. You just have to. I mean, Liverpool for a long time, up until very recently, were selling their best player.
Yeah.
Suarez was sold, Coutinho was sold, but you can sell that to your supporters if you then go ahead and reinvest that money in other players. That's fine. I mean, players won't like. I mean, I'm sure you didn't like when Luis Suarez was sold, but at least when you saw
to the shower shit they replaced him with, he wasn't happy.
Yeah,
Coutinho
was sold
very well.
And you saw Salah, Mane, Firmino, Wijnaldum, like really good players who became part of your first title winning team in a long time. And even if you hadn't won the title, you'd won the Champions League the year before.
Coutinho's sale financed Van Dijk and Alisson, and they were
and there's no way you'd have won the league without them 2 players.
Not a chance, no.
No chance. So in hindsight, you'd say, it's like the Keegan thing, selling Andy Cole to Man United. It's very like that. It's okay if you go out and buy Les Ferdinand. It's no problem then. And that's my thing. I wouldn't have no problem with selling Andy Carroll or whoever else, selling Johan Kabay or selling, whoever it may be. Moussa Sissoko was sold for big money. And when it comes to Rafa Benitez's time, they sold Sissoko, they sold Wijnaldum, they went down. They sold a couple of others, I think, but not for the same amount of money. They didn't buy anyone really. That first year they went down, they signed maybe 30 million worth of maybe championship type players, like they signed Modi Ame, signed Daryl Murphy, fellas who could get them out of that division.
Yeah.
But then they
lack of ambition, essentially.
That was they were in the championship, so that was okay. But when they went up to the Premier League, Rafa was absolutely shafted.
Yeah.
And they never gave him any money, and they said, make do with what you have. And he dug his heels in his final season, midway through his final season. He wanted Miguel Almiron, who's still there down today. Dug his heels in. He said, I'm going to walk if I don't get this player. So he got him eventually. And Newcastle, over his last 6 months, from the time the transfer window closed in January till the end of that season, were the 7th best team in the league, according to points.
Yeah.
So it was heading, like they were heading the right direction. And, basically, they just, a bit like Alan Shearer, they just didn't answer his calls for 2 months until he got the message. And on the 1st of July or whatever his contract ended, that was it. And 17 days later, we had Steve Bruce.
Like if ever there's a Steve Bruce Appreciation Society formed, I don't think Kieran Shanahan would be putting himself in the frame for the chairperson or secretary of that. That'd be a fair comment.
No, I was actually saying that I bought this fancy microphone here for a couple of £100, and I reckon we could, maybe all the Newcastle supporters could get together and have some kind of a whip round to pay off Bruce's contract and get him out of there before he relegates us again.
Once your expenses have been covered, of course.
Yeah, once we take out the £300 for the microphone,
You're putting me to shame here as well, I'm small microphone compared to yours. But,
yeah. But, I have the receipts in the car still.
Just home for that, yeah.
Yeah, no bother, Steve. He might not. We could write it off against tax, maybe. But no, I mean, look, it's been an absolute fucking disaster. Am I allowed to curse?
Well, you just have, so yeah, of course you are, yeah. Uncensored, yeah.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Yeah. It's been an absolute disaster since the start. The thing that really drives me mad, yes, he's a terrible manager. Yes, his formations and tactics make absolutely no sense of any kind. Right? That's like, fine. Just throw all that, and I don't want to get into it because I'd be here all day. The performances over the last 2 years have been shocking. The results last year didn't marry the performances. Like every statistical measure, whether it was any of the new modern stuff like expected goals or, I mean, I like to use a statistic called wins and losses. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And goals scored and goals against and stuff like that. Every metric was saying Newcastle should be like bottom of the table pretty much last year. And by hook or by crook, they just pulled the players. In fairness, they dug results out of the hat for him, right? And I'll give Bruce credit for that. They finished 13th last season. They were shocking all season for pretty much, but they finished where they finished, and points matter. This season, the results have began to marry the performances from last season. But now, in the last 20 games, they've won 2 games in the last 20 in all competitions.
Yeah, that's shocking.
They are. We are going to get relegated under Steve Bruce. I have no doubt about that. The media treatment of him, now it has cottoned on a little lately. The pundits have started to turn around. But I mean, I've seen some belters like
Paul
defending him.
Merson
It's
in particular.
incredible.
Paul Merson.
Paul Merson lately, yeah, he came out with one this weekend saying Newcastle are still living in the Les Ferdinand and Alan Shearer era. Now, you've spoke to me for an hour and a half. Does it sound like I'm living in that era? You know,
No,
I
you're
mean,
quite realistic, like, you know.
yeah, I remember the Bobby Robson years quite fondly. I remember, I mean, in hindsight, the Kevin Keegan years quite fondly, but I don't expect that that's what you should have every year at all. Like Newcastle haven't won a trophy since 1969.
The Fairs Cup, is
And that
it?
trophy doesn't, yeah, it doesn't even exist anymore. The Fairs Cup, it was the UEFA Cup at the time now, but the Fairs Cup or the Europa League to the children watching. But I mentioned it a while ago about the Bobby Robson thing at the end. It wasn't going well. That's where it kind of stems from, I think, that Newcastle fans were known to like not be thrilled to finish fifth, say. But the context to that is they had just been in Europe every single year for the previous decade. So like it's kind of reasonable. Now, I'm not saying it's right, but you know, it's not like no, by the way, it's not like St. James's Park was empty at the final whistle of their last home game against Wolves. But there was a good few people had left. That's true. It's also true to say that Sir Bobby Robson is without a shot. I mean, a god at Newcastle and never won anything. Like Kevin Keegan is a god at Newcastle fans, never won anything. Alan Shearer is a god, won the Premier League at Blackburn, never won anything at Newcastle. He's a god. Like Alan Shearer, he is our Premier League trophy. I've heard that said.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think the fact they are is that you appreciate good football. You are good footballing people in Newcastle. You know what I mean?
I think with Newcastle support, from what I've like, again, I'm living in Ireland, so you know it's harder for me. But it's that the knowing that your club is hopeless, knowing that you under the current setup, we are engineered to fail. Our club is engineered to not succeed. It's almost like success is like anathema to Mike Ashley. Yeah. That's the depressing thing. That's a killer. Like,
Kieran, you haven't been to a Newcastle game, but that's a principle thing with Mike Ashley. Just to explain, like, if Mike Ashley left in the morning, you would probably go over quite regularly.
A couple of times a year, probably. Yeah, I think. So yeah, like I said, when the Carroll thing, the Pardew coming in thing, I kind of just said, right, this fella doesn't care one iota about the fans, and like some of the things he'd done with Keegan and Shearer, trying to rename the ground, the treatment of Gutierrez was abhorrent. Stuff like that he did, some of the mental things that they have done. I mean, I could have a list of 50 things here if I wanted. Like, you know, I'm just going off the top of my head. I couldn't put money in his pocket. I just couldn't. And by the way, I don't fault anyone that goes. I wouldn't tell anyone to not go. Absolutely not. But as a point of principle, I suppose if I had gone a couple of times, I might have been hooked and I might have kept going.
Yeah.
But I was that age. I would have been kind of college going age when, you know, I was 18 in 2007. So Mike Ashley bought the club around the time of my 18th birthday. Yeah. So around about the time I came out of college, when I had a few bob and I could afford to go over, I kind of, as a point of principle, wouldn't go then.
Yeah.
I'm kind of sorry I didn't go during the Rafa time, because there was a few games there where the place was bouncing, you know.
But even buying jerseys and stuff, you're saying you wouldn't buy a Newcastle jersey?
No. But that's, again, yeah, I just wouldn't put money into his pocket. No, Newcastle United's club shop is a Sports Direct shop. It's not a Newcastle United club shop, for instance. You can walk into Newcastle's club shop and buy a Sunderland kit. Like, you wouldn't walk into a Liverpool club shop and buy a Man United kit. Like,
no, that's and that's Steve Bruce as well. I think he was destined to fail at Newcastle. The fact he managed Sunderland, that was a big no-no. Like, that's the equivalent of a Man United manager having managed Liverpool previously. Like, that's a vicious enough rivalry. Newcastle and Sunderland.
I don't think that was held against him per se. Now, he did say when he was manager of Sunderland that he never wanted to manage Newcastle. He did say that, or something along those lines. But even at that, like, to be honest, if he did well, it wouldn't matter. Like, Newcastle have a bit of a rivalry with Liverpool. You know, nothing unpleasant or anything like
More
that.
Respect there, I would say.
Yeah.
Scottish and Jardy.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count against, Rafa Benitez that he was the Liverpool manager, but he did well for Newcastle. Like, this is the thing. This kind of thing. Like, Kenny Dalglish won the league at Blackburn, came to Newcastle. It was like, if he'd won loads of games, he'd have been like, oh, nice one. You know what I mean? Yeah. It wouldn't have mattered. That's my thing. Is like, it really, what I personally, anyway, I can only speak for myself, but what I judge Steve Bruce on is, what am I seeing on the field on a Saturday? What am I seeing in his press conferences? What's he saying? What's he doing? Not what he was or what he used to be or who he played for or whatever, who he supports or any of that stuff. What are you doing in the job? Are you good at your job? If you are, you will be appreciated. Every Newcastle manager who came to Newcastle, I put it this way, Chris Hughton didn't win anything at Newcastle. But find a Newcastle fan with a bad word to say about Chris Hughton and I'll give you £100 because you won.
He's one of the nice guys.
Because he was respected, you know?
Yeah. Kind of a quick fire round. Best Newcastle memory?
Feyenoord away, 2002-03.
Okay. Your worst Newcastle memory?
A lot of competition for this award, prestigious award. But I think, probably Rafa leaving and Bruce coming in. I'm amazed that that's what it is, but I've thought about this. You asked me this yesterday to think about it. And I had
like training, it was a big part. We did a lot of prep for this.
No stone unturned here on the Parlay Wood podcast. But I had said I had disengaged with the club around 2011, but Rafa, like he did with a lot of people, brought me back. You know, I was like, Al Pacino and The Godfather 3, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. But
and to be fair, he did that with me as well, Liverpool, like winning Champions League.
I was all the way out. I mean, I still watched the Newcastle games, I still kept abreast of what was going on, but I was all the way out in terms of affinity, and my their credit in the bank was 99% gone with me. I mean, I still follow them. I wouldn't support anybody else, but Rafa brought me back, and signs on when Rafa walked out of the club, or when he was not renewed, or whatever you want to call it. Steve Bruce came in. 10,000 people didn't renew their season tickets.
Yeah, that's a big blow.
That's 20% of the stadium, Pardew. Now, when you consider Newcastle's average attendance in the Championship was well over 40,000, that's the kind of fan base you're talking about. It takes a lot to drive away a fan to Newcastle fans. I mean, they are. I mean, I don't want to sound biased, but I mean, they're at least amongst the best fans in the country, I would say.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Jill's uncle through marriage, Billy. You met him before as well. Yeah, he's a big Newcastle. He goes over his family, and he'd enjoy this now here about Newcastle reminiscing. Like, he would have been a Newcastle fan for a good number of years, and he goes over a good bit and stuff. But when Mike Ashley gets out with the club,
I look forward to the day when, not for me per se, because but for the people that I follow, for like, you follow people on Twitter, you listen to podcasts, I have a membership of the Newcastle United Supporters Trust. You pay a few pounds every year to kind of be a member, and you're kept abreast of what's going on, And I think the reason why I follow them through there was good times and bad, but the support is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Maybe it's because they don't win anything. Maybe, I don't know. Is it like I wonder if they were like, if they got taken over and they became Man City, for instance, would the support drop off a bit? I don't know. I doubt it.
It's kind of a working class thing, the solidarity, I suppose.
Maybe it's the kind of the sense of revolt and the rage against the authority kind of thing, that it's a kind of almost a sign of protest to go to the match, almost. But it certainly seems that way.
Okay, just moving on with the quick fire. Favorite player? I can guess who this is anyway, but favorite Newcastle player?
Yeah, Titus Bramble, no doubt about it. I suppose Alan Shearer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, more likely. Although I have to say, Shea Given gives him a little bit of a run for his money because he's Irish.
No, he was a fantastic goalkeeper for Newcastle.
He was one of the best goalkeepers in the world for a bit.
Yeah. Least favorite player? Or do you think you might have answered that inadvertently?
I didn't like Titus Bramble, but I did not like him that much. Jesus, Michael Owen is fairly laudable, I have to say, on his time at Newcastle, which is horrible. I know. But no, I know he was. I mean, am I saying the worst player or the player I disliked the most? I disliked Alan Smith intensely. Just don't ask me why. I just didn't. I never liked him. Probably. Yeah, Jesus, Titus Bramble pushed me over the edge a few times. All right, he was bad. He'll go with Titus Bramble. Yeah.
The favorite game is generally linked to the favorite memory, but aside from Feyenoord, what would be your favorite game?
I suppose the Asprilla hat trick against Barcelona would be right up there. Again, I was a bit young, but I've watched it back, obviously. The United 5-0. Yeah, we go with the United 5-0, I suppose.
Yeah.
Basically, because I think both of us would agree on that.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with you. That was my favourite Newcastle memory anyway myself. But favourite goal.
Shearer against Everton, the volley.
So, are you going to stay up this season?
No. Well, if Steve Bruce is the manager, yes, absolutely, we will go down. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, I put it this way: when Newcastle were 10 points clear of the relegation zone in early January, I was saying then we will go down if we keep Steve, because what we were seeing from Newcastle and what the other clubs like Fulham, Brighton, Burnley, even though they weren't picking up a lot of wins at that time, what they were showing was a much more sustainable model of picking up points than what Newcastle had been showing. And that has been borne out. I mean, the performance, Newcastle have been dreadful pretty much for 19 months, but the last, since they lost to Brentford in the Cup in December, it has been the worst stretch I have ever seen. No manager at any, even League One club, would survive 2 wins in 20. It's not unbelievable to me because I follow Newcastle and I've seen the things Mike Ashley has done.
Yeah.
But to any logical thinking football person, it is incomprehensible that they would keep Steve Bruce on. But here we are.
I think the situation is that because Sheffield United and West Brom have had such horrendous seasons, it's masked how bad Newcastle have been a bit. But I think it'd be okay. I think you have a result in you, like the way you beat Southampton there and you beat Everton. I can see getting a couple of wins in the last 10, 11 games.
If Steve Bruce was sacked tomorrow morning, and I'm not joking you now, if Pardew Cronin became the manager of Newcastle tomorrow, we would stay up. I actually believe that Bruce has fallen out with so many players.
I'd like to say thank you for your faith in my footballing.
Oh, no hassle. No hassle. I've seen you play. I've seen you play Championship Manager, Patrick. I've seen you play Championship Manager. Like, yeah. I've seen it. You won the Champions League with Limerick FC that one time. I've seen it. Like.
Yeah.
But no, like he's so reviled by the supporters and so reviled, I think, by a lot of the players at this stage, that just the lack of his presence would get 40% more, 50% more out of the players. Which is what I mean?
Which is my next question. Steve Bruce goes, who do you want back? Who do you want to replace him?
Literally anyone. But if you're asking for a serious answer, I mean, I've heard talk of Chris Wilder, maybe the ex-Sheffield United manager, like someone who's a record of a coach, like a Wilder, an Eddie Howe, someone in that mold, Brendan Rodgers-y type. I'm not saying Brendan Rodgers, you know what I mean? But what it will be is it'll be Mark Hughes, it'll be another Alan Pardew, it'll be, someone like that, because that's someone who'll be glad of the job and who'll do what they're told and who'll toe the party line and not criticize Mike Ashley publicly. That's what will end up happening more than likely.
And Rafa would be your preferred choice.
I'd have Rafa back in the morning. Yeah. I mean, I'd have.
One final question: what does being a Newcastle fan mean to you?
What it means really is kind of just what it has meant is sticking with them, even though like you go through periods of being like really engaged, then less engaged, then really engaged again. But whatever it is about them, they always manage to be in the news. They always manage to be interesting. They always manage to be like, there's always a draw when you follow Newcastle. There's always something, like there's never a season where the season peters out and you finish 10th. Nothing that never always. There's always something to talk about when you follow Newcastle, which is a good and bad thing, but it does keep you engaged, definitely.
Kieran, thank you sincerely for coming on the show this evening.
No problem.
We're going to have future podcasts in the next while with you.
Just look, it was, first of all, pleasure to be on. I enjoyed talking about Newcastle. It was enjoyable, somewhat even therapeutic, one might say, to get the frustrations. I think as well, for this, maybe do I know every single thing about Newcastle Ryman versus over the last 30 years? Probably not. But what I would do is be honest and I think give a fair opinion on what I've seen. When you're not there in person at the games, there's stuff you don't see. And it's difficult to know everything and know the context behind everything. But at the same time, I think I have a fairly good grasp of it. But it's nice to be able to come on and kind of give the side, because it does bother me when I see, I was listening, you listen to radio stations, even in Ireland, and they have very kind of generic opinions on Newcastle and on their support and on the way their supporters think or should think. And I think they get a bad rap because of that, because there aren't many ex-professionals maybe from Ireland that played all their life for Newcastle in the media. And I think that hurts their narrative in the public. Thanks a million for having me. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it thoroughly, and best of luck with it for the rest of it.
But we'll see you next time on the Pardew and Bruce podcast. Good night, God bless.